The morning rain fell softly over Portland, painting the windows with silver lines. Emily had just returned home after years away, college, heartbreaks, and a life that had gone too fast. Now, at 24, she was back in her father's quiet house. The same one she grew up in, with its wooden floors, lemon-scented kitchen, and the silence that always seemed too heavy since her mother passed away. That Sunday, Emily decided to take a long shower before starting her day. She turned on the hot water, letting the steam rise, hoping it would clear her thoughts. She felt tired from the move, emotionally drained from leaving behind a life that didn't turn out the way she planned. The warm water was comforting, like a soft reminder that she was safe again, home again. After a few minutes, she reached out for her towel and froze. She'd forgotten to bring one. Her heart sank as she looked around the bathroom, water dripping from her hair. "Oh no," she muttered under her breath. The towel she needed was hanging on the chair in her bedroom, just across the hallway. Normally, she would have dashed across, but she wasn't alone. Her father was downstairs. She could hear faint movement, the sound of dishes and a radio playing softly in the kitchen. It had been a long time since they lived together, and though she loved him deeply, she still felt a little shy. Life apart had made them strangers in small ways. Emily hesitated for a moment, trying to figure out what to do. She thought about wrapping herself in the shower curtain, but laughed quietly at how ridiculous that would look. So, with a deep breath, she decided to call out, "Dad?" Her voice echoed lightly down the hallway. After a pause, she heard his footsteps on the stairs. "Yeah, Em?" Her heart skipped. "Could you, grab my towel from my room? I forgot it." There was a moment of silence, then his calm voice came back. "Sure thing." Emily felt a mix of embarrassment and gratitude. It was a small, ordinary thing, but it somehow made her feel like a kid again, safe, cared for. She heard him walk down the hall, the soft creak of floorboards she still remembered from childhood. A knock came at the bathroom door. "Got it right here," Michael said. His tone was warm, steady, the same voice that once read her bedtime stories and comforted her after every heartbreak. "Thanks, Dad," she said softly, opening the door just a crack. A small puff of steam drifted out, and she quickly reached her hand through Dot as he handed her the towel. Their fingers brushed only for a second, but it sent a wave of emotion through both of them. It wasn't awkward, but it was deeply human. A moment that reminded them how much time had passed, how much had changed, and how much they both missed the feeling of being part of something whole. He gave a small nod, his eyes kind. "There you go. Try not to forget next time," he said with a gentle smile, half teasing, half affectionate. Emily smiled back through the slightly open door. "I'll try." As he walked away, she stood there for a moment, towel in hand, feeling a strange warmth inside her chest. It wasn't about the towel at all, it was about him. About the quiet way he had always been there, without needing to say much. When she finished her shower and looked at herself in the mirror, she saw something different. Maybe it was the way the light hit her face. Or maybe it was because she finally felt grounded again. Being back home brought back memories, the sound of her mother's laughter, the smell of Sunday breakfasts, and her father's steady voice calling her name from downstairs. She wrapped herself in the towel and stepped out into the hallway. Her room was exactly how she remembered: soft yellow curtains, an old bookshelf, and a framed photo of her parents on their wedding day. Her mother's smile in that picture always made her heart ache. She sat on the edge of the bed, feeling the softness of the comforter under her fingers, and for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to breathe deeply. Downstairs, she heard her father moving around again. The clink of a mug, the sound of the coffee machine, the quiet hum of normal life. It was strange how something so simple could feel so comforting. She realized how much she had missed this rhythm. The sound of another person in the house. The feeling of not being alone. A few minutes later, she went downstairs, her hair still damp and tied up loosely. Her father was standing by the counter, pouring himself a cup of coffee. When he saw her, he smiled. "Morning again," he said. "Morning," she replied, taking a seat. He glanced at her with a grin. "Towel crisis handled." She laughed, shaking her head. "Yeah, thanks again." "Any time," he said, taking a sip. There was an easy silence between them, broken only by the soft sound of rain outside. It wasn't uncomfortable, just full of unspoken things. Two people who had lost someone they both loved, learning how to fill that space again. Emily looked at him for a moment. His hair had more grey than before, and his face carried the quiet sadness of someone who had lived through heartbreak. But there was something peaceful about him too, something that made her feel safe, even when everything else in her life was uncertain. "Dad," she said softly. "Yeah, I'm really glad I came home." He looked at her, eyes kind and full of emotion. "Me too, Em." The way he said it, steady, sincere, made her throat tighten. She smiled, blinking quickly, not wanting him to see the tears gathering in her eyes. He turned toward the window, watching the rain. "You know, the house feels alive again. I didn't realize how quiet it had gotten until you came back." Emily nodded, her voice low. "It feels different to me too. Like I can finally breathe again." He smiled faintly. "Good. You deserve that." They sat there together, not saying much else. The morning light spread across the kitchen, turning everything soft and golden. For a brief moment, it felt like time had slowed down, like all the hurt, all the loss, and all the years apart had led them back to this one simple, healing morning. And though Emily didn't know what her future held, she knew one thing for certain. Being here, with her father, was exactly where she needed to be right now. That forgotten towel had brought more than just a moment of embarrassment. It had brought back connection, warmth, and a reminder that love, in its simplest form, still lived quietly between them. It wasn't a big event. It wasn't dramatic. But in its simplicity it was everything. And as she looked out at the rain falling softly beyond the window, Emily realized something beautiful. Sometimes, life finds a way to remind you of what truly matters, not through grand gestures, but through small, tender moments that stay in your heart forever. That evening, Portland's sky cleared after the rain, leaving behind a cool breeze and a faint smell of pine. Emily sat on the couch, her legs tucked under her, scrolling through job listings on her laptop. The house was warm, the fireplace glowing softly, and faint jazz music played from the old speaker her father always used. It was one of those nights that felt both peaceful and a little lonely. Michael sat across the room, reading a book. He wasn't much of a talker, but his presence was comforting. Emily caught herself watching him for a moment, how he turned pages slowly, how calm he looked. It reminded her of how he used to read to her when she was small. The years had changed both of them, but something about that quiet connection still felt the same. "Hey," she said softly, closing her laptop. "Thanks again for helping me this morning." He looked up from his book, smiling faintly. "That's what dads are for." She laughed lightly. "Yeah, but still, I really appreciate it." "Don't worry about it," he said. "You've had a long week." The warmth in his voice surprised her. It had been a long time since anyone had spoken to her like that, with patience, with care. It felt different from the rushed, distracted conversations she used to have back in the city. Here, things moved slower, and emotions felt clearer. For a few moments, neither spoke. The sound of the rain gutter, dripping outside filled the silence. Then Emily leaned back and asked, "Do you ever get used to being alone?" Michael closed the book and looked into the fireplace. "Not really," he said quietly. "You learn to live with it, but it's never easy." Emily's heart tightened. She knew he missed her mother deeply, even after 2 years. Sometimes she could still see it in his eyes, the kind of sadness that doesn't fade, only softens over time. "I'm sorry," she said. He looked over at her, his face gentle. "For what?" "For leaving. I should have come home sooner." He shook his head. "You were living your life. That's what your mom and I always wanted for you." Emily smiled, but her eyes glistened. "I just wish I could have been here more." Michael's gaze softened. "You're here now. That's what matters." That simple sentence lingered in her mind long after he said it. "You're here now." It carried warmth and forgiveness, something she hadn't realized she needed until that moment. They spent the rest of the evening talking about small things: her job search, his work at the local hardware store, the new neighbor who always parked in front of their mailbox. It was ordinary conversation, but for Emily it felt meaningful. After years of distance and silence, they were finding their rhythm again. When she went upstairs to her room later that night, she passed the old family photos lining the hallway. Her mother's smile stared back from every frame, bright, full of life. Emily touched one gently, tracing the outline of her parents on their wedding day. She missed her mother deeply, but in that moment, she realized how much she also missed seeing her father truly happy. The next morning, she woke early to the smell of coffee and toast. Michael was already in the kitchen, wearing his old flannel shirt, humming quietly to himself. "Morning," she said, yawning. "Morning," he replied with a small smile. "Coffee? Please." He poured her a cup and slid it across the table. The way he moved, calm, steady, made her feel safe, like nothing bad could touch her here. They sat together at the table, the sunlight spilling across the counter. Emily sipped her coffee and watched the steam rise between them. "You always wake up early," she said. He chuckled. "Force of habit. Your mum used to make me get up early for morning walks. Never could sleep in after that. Do you still miss her?" she asked quietly. He paused for a moment before answering. "Every day," he said. "But I try to focus on the good memories now. It helps." Emily nodded, swallowing hard. She'd be happy you're doing okay. He smiled faintly. "I don't know if I'd call it okay, but I'm trying." Something in his tone made her reach out, placing her hand gently over his. He looked up, surprised at first, then smiled softly. That simple touch, warm, comforting, said everything words couldn't. "I'm glad you're home." He said. "Me too," she whispered. The kitchen filled with quiet again, but it wasn't empty. It was full of something unspoken: love, loss, and the healing that happens when two people finally let each other in. Later that day, Emily went for a walk through the neighborhood. The trees were turning yellow, the air crisp and light. As she walked, she thought about her father. How strong he had been through everything, how much he had endured without ever complaining. For the first time, she saw him not just as her dad, but as a man, someone who had loved deeply, lost deeply, and kept going anyway. When she returned home, Michael was on the porch fixing a loose step. He looked up and smiled when he saw her. "You walk faster than your mom ever did," he said jokingly. Emily laughed. "She hated exercise." He chuckled, then said softly, "But she loved sitting here, watching you play in the yard. You used to make her laugh so much." Emily sat beside him on the porch steps. The sky had turned golden with sunset, and the light made everything look softer. "I remember," she said. "She used to tell me that laughter was her favorite sound." Michael looked out at the trees. "It still is," he murmured. They sat there quietly, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The air was cool, but Emily felt warm inside. For the first time in a long while, the silence between them didn't hurt. It healed. That night, after dinner, Emily went to her room and sat by the window. She could hear her father downstairs cleaning up, humming again. She smiled faintly. The sound of him moving around the house made her feel peaceful. She realized then that home wasn't just a place. It was a person. And though the years had created distance between them, it was slowly disappearing. When she finally went to bed, she thought about how fragile life could be, and how easily love could be lost if not cared for. She made herself a quiet promise to never let silence grow between them again. As she drifted to sleep, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Comfort. Not the kind that comes from luxury or success, but the kind that comes from belonging. And in the room across the hall, Michael sat by the window, looking out at the moonlit street. He thought of his daughter, his late wife, and how, somehow, life had given him one more chance to feel whole again. The rain had stopped. The night was calm. And in that small, ordinary house, two hearts that had been broken by loss slowly began to mend quietly, gently, and beautifully. A week later, the weather in Portland had turned colder. The trees outside the window were losing their last golden leaves, and the evenings came earlier now, wrapping the house in soft shadows. Emily had started her new part-time job at a small art gallery downtown. It wasn't what she had planned for her career, but it made her feel useful again, and being back home gave her the quiet she needed to think clearly. Her father, Michael, had been working extra hours, fixing up things around the house in his free time. He didn't say much, but Emily could see how hard he was trying to make things feel normal again. Every morning he'd prepare her coffee, and every evening he'd ask about her day, even if it was just a short talk over simple meals. The kindness in his gestures was small but steady. That Friday, Emily came home early, holding a bag of groceries. She'd made a decision to cook dinner for her father as a surprise. For years, he had taken care of her, even after losing so much. She wanted to do something to remind him that he wasn't alone, that love still lived quietly between them. She set the table with care, 2 plates, folded napkins, a single candle in the middle. The house smelled of pasta, garlic, and a bit of burnt bread, which made her laugh quietly to herself. She even played one of her father's favorite old jazz records on the turntable. It had been her parents' favorite song, the same one they used to dance to in the living room when she was little. When Michael walked through the front door, the warm light and soft music caught him off guard. He stopped in the doorway, surprised. "Emily, what's all this?" She smiled, her eyes bright. "Dinner. I wanted to say thank you for letting me stay, and for everything you do." He set down his jacket, clearly touched. "You didn't have to do that." "I know," she said softly, "but I wanted to." They sat down to eat, the candlelight flickering between them. It wasn't fancy, but it felt special. For a while, neither of them said much. They just enjoyed the food, the warmth, the comfort of being together. Then, slowly, conversation began to flow, easy and natural. "You remember when Mom used to make pasta every Friday?" Emily asked, twirling her fork. Michael chuckled. "Of course. She always said pasta night was her secret to keeping us close." Emily smiled. "It worked." "It did," he agreed, a hint of nostalgia in his voice. She had a way of making even the smallest things feel like celebrations. They both went quiet for a moment, lost in memory. The sound of the record filled the silence, the gentle rhythm wrapping around them like a blanket. "Do you ever dance anymore?" Emily asked suddenly, glancing up at him. Michael laughed softly. "Dance? Not really. Not since. His voice trailed off. He didn't have to finish the sentence. She looked at him kindly. You should, you know. Mom wouldn't want you to stop doing things that made you happy. He smiled faintly, looking down at his hands. Maybe you're right. The rest of the meal passed with more laughter than either of them expected. They talked about her job, his old friends, the way the neighborhood had changed. It was the kind of easy, heartwarming conversation that filled the empty spaces of the house. After dinner, Emily stood to clean up, but Michael shook his head. You cooked. I'll do the dishes. She smiled. You sure? Absolutely. As he carried the plates to the sink, Emily leaned against the counter, watching him. There was something about the way he moved steady, careful, that filled her with quiet admiration. He wasn't just her father. He was a man who had survived loss and loneliness with grace. You know, she said softly, I didn't realize how much I missed this. He turned slightly, looking at her. This? Being home. Talking to you. Feeling like everything's okay again. He smiled gently, his eyes warm. I missed it too. There was a pause. The record had stopped playing, and the only sound was the water running in the sink. The silence felt different now, full, not empty. Michael turned off the tap and dried his hands. You've grown into such a strong woman, Emily, he said quietly. Your mom would be proud of you. Her chest tightened at his words. You think so? I know so. Tears welled in her eyes, but she smiled through them. Thanks, Dad. He gave her a small nod, his expression soft but full of emotion. And I'm proud of you too. For coming home. For finding your way back. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, neither speaking. It wasn't romantic, it was something deeper. It was understanding. Healing. Emily blinked away the tears and laughed lightly. I didn't mean to make this so emotional. Michael chuckled. We're Rileys. We don't know how to do things halfway. Asterisk. That made her laugh harder. The tension broke, and for a second, the house felt alive again like it used to. Later that night, when the dishes were done and the lights were dimmed, they sat together in the living room with mugs of tea. The fire crackled softly, and outside, rain began to fall again. You ever think about moving? Emily asked, her voice calm. He shook his head. No. This house has too many memories. I like it here. She nodded. I think Mom would too. He smiled. Yeah, I like to think she's still here in her own way. They sat in silence again, both lost in thought. The sound of the rain against the windows filled the room. Soft and rhythmic. Emily looked at him, her heart full. She finally understood something that had taken her years to see. Love doesn't always fade. Sometimes it just changes shape. It becomes quieter, steadier, and it finds new ways to stay alive. When she stood to head upstairs, she paused by the fireplace and looked back at him. Good night, Dad. Good night, Em, he said, his voice low but warm. And thank you for tonight. She smiled. You're welcome. As she climbed the stairs, she felt lighter, almost peaceful. The house no longer felt like a place frozen in the past. It felt alive again. Downstairs, her father sat quietly, looking into the fire. He felt something shift inside him. Something gentle but powerful. That dinner, simple, ordinary, imperfect, had changed everything. It reminded them that love doesn't need grand gestures. Sometimes it just needs time, forgiveness, and a shared meal across a small wooden table. And in that quiet home, two hearts, once lost in their own grief, found warmth again. Not through words, not through promises, but through something far more enduring. The comfort of simply being together. Asterisk. The weeks passed quickly after that dinner, and for the first time in years, The house felt alive again. Emily had found a small rhythm in her new life work at the gallery during the day. Quiet evenings with her father, and peaceful mornings with coffee by the window. The rain no longer felt lonely. It was simply part of home. Michael noticed the change too. There was laughter in the house again, the smell of cooking, the sound of footsteps upstairs. He hadn't realized how deeply the silence had settled into him until it was gone. Having Emily back made him feel like life was restarting in a softer, more meaningful way. One evening, Emily came home late from work. The city lights were fading behind her, and a soft drizzle kissed her hair as she stepped through the front door. Inside, the house was warm. The living room glowed with the light of the fireplace. Her father had fallen asleep on the couch, a book resting against his chest, his reading glasses sliding down his nose. The sight made her smile. She stood there for a moment, just watching him. There was something peaceful about seeing him rest, something that reminded her of all the nights he had stayed awake when she was younger, waiting for her to come home from school trips or late study sessions. Time had changed them both, but love still showed itself in small, quiet ways. Emily grabbed a blanket from the armchair and gently laid it over him. He stirred a little, his voice half asleep. "You're home?" "Yeah," she whispered. "Go back to sleep. Did you eat?" He murmured, "I'll fix something." "Don't worry," she said, smiling. He nodded, drifting back to sleep, his breathing steady. Emily stood there a few more seconds, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. For years, she had chased big dreams, careers, cities, people, but none of it compared to the comfort of this simple moment. Being home, safe, and surrounded by the quiet love of family. She went to the kitchen and made herself a cup of tea. The walls glowed softly from the firelight. The radio was still on, playing old music that made the air feel familiar. As she stirred her tea, she realized how much she had grown since coming back. The world outside had taught her ambition, but home was teaching her peace. Later that night, she walked into the living room again. Her father was still asleep, the book now resting on the floor. She picked it up. It was one of her mother's old novels, worn at the edges. Her throat tightened as she turned it over in her hands. Inside the front cover, in her mother's handwriting, were the words, "For Michael, every story we share is part of our forever." Emily sat down on the edge of the couch and looked at her father's face. He looked older now. Yes, but there was something calm and kind in his features. She suddenly realized how strong he had been all these years, how quietly he had carried his pain, how gently he had continued living even when everything inside him must have hurt. "Good night, Dad," she whispered again, brushing a bit of dust off the book's cover. He mumbled something half awake. "Good night. I'm glad you came home." The words touched her deeper than she expected. "Me too," she said softly, though he was already asleep. The next morning she woke early to the smell of pancakes. Her father was in the kitchen, humming, flipping breakfast like he used to when she was a kid. "You're up early," she said, smiling. "Habit," he replied. "You've got a big day ahead, right? Your gallery's opening event?" She nodded, surprised he remembered. "Yeah, just a small one. Some local artists are showing their work." He handed her a plate. "You'll do great. I'm proud of you." The way he said it made her chest tighten. He said it often now, not out of routine, but because he meant it. She realized that their relationship had changed quietly over these past months. They weren't just father and daughter anymore. They were two people learning to live again, side by side, helping each other heal. That evening, the event went well. Emily returned home tired but glowing with pride. When she walked inside, her father was waiting with 2 mugs of hot cocoa. "Celebration," he said with a grin. They sat by the fire again, sipping their drinks in comfortable silence. The rain started outside, tapping softly against the windows. Emily looked at her father and felt a rush of gratitude. "I was thinking," she said, "maybe we should fix up the garden next weekend. Mom used to love it, and it's kind of faded." Michael nodded slowly, his smile deepening. "I'd like that. And maybe plant her favorite flowers again." "Lily," he said immediately. "She always said they looked happiest in the rain." They both laughed softly. For a long time after that, they just sat together, the sound of the rain blending with the crackle of the fire. Emily rested her head against the back of the couch, her mind drifting to the small moments that had rebuilt their bond. Every cup of coffee, every quiet talk, every shared silence that didn't need words. Later that night, before going upstairs, Emily paused in the hallway. The family photos on the wall looked different now. They no longer reminded her of what was lost. They reminded her of what still remained. She stopped at the last frame. Her parents on their wedding day. Her mother's smile glowed, her father's arm around her shoulders. Emily reached out and touched the glass gently. "You'd be proud of him, Mum," she whispered. "He's doing okay now." "We both are." The next morning was bright and cold. Sunlight streamed through the windows, washing the house in gold. Michael was already outside, trimming the bushes near the porch. Emily brought him a mug of coffee and handed it over. He took it with a smile. "Thanks, partner." "Partner?" she teased. He grinned. "Well, it feels that way now. You and me, keeping this place running." She laughed. "Yeah, we make a pretty good team." They stood there for a while, watching the morning light touch the trees. The world felt peaceful, simple, whole in that moment. Emily realized something quietly beautiful. Sometimes, life takes everything apart just to put it back together differently. The home she returned to wasn't the same one she left, but maybe that was the point. It had grown, just like she had. Love hadn't disappeared after her mother's death. It had only changed its form, settling gently in the way her father smiled, the way he remembered, the way he showed up every day even when it was hard. That night, as she sat in her room writing in her journal, she thought about how a simple mistake, forgetting a towel, had led to all this healing. That one small moment had opened a door back into her father's heart, and into her own. Outside, the rain began again. She closed her notebook, turned off the lamp, and whispered to herself, "Home isn't where you start. It's where you learn to belong again." Downstairs, Michael turned off the lights, checked the doors, and looked up toward her room. He smiled to himself, his heart lighter than it had been in years. The house was no longer silent. It was alive with warmth, with laughter, with love reborn in the simplest of ways. And though life would keep changing, one truth would stay. Sometimes, the most ordinary moments become the most beautiful chapters in the story of a family's heart.